Let me read to you a passage from the 15th chapter of St. John's Gospel, verses 1 to 8. It's the Gospel for Wednesday after the 5th Sunday of Easter. St. John writes, Jesus said, I am the true vine, and my Father is the vine dresser. He cuts off every branch in me that bears no fruit, while every branch that does bear fruit he prunes, so that it will be even more fruitful. You are already clean because of the word I have spoken to you. Remain in me, and I will remain in you. No branch can bear fruit by itself. It must remain in the vine. Neither can you bear fruit unless you remain in me. I am the vine, you are the branches. If a man remains in me, and I in him, he will bear much fruit. Apart from me, you can do nothing. If anyone does not remain in me, he is like a branch that is thrown away and withers. Such branches are picked up, thrown into the fire, and burned. If you remain in me and my words remain in you, ask whatever you wish, and it will be given you. This is to my Father's glory, that you bear much fruit, showing yourselves to be my disciples. That's from John chapter 15, verses 1 to 8. Our Lord speaks about his being our life. What do I mean? Well, at this point in theories of physics, physicists tell us that there are four fundamental interactions of nature. They are, using their common names, the strong nuclear force, or the strong interaction, electromagnetism, weak interaction, and gravitation. Strong nuclear force, the strong interaction, is, at atomic scale, about 100 times stronger than electromagnetism, which in turn is much stronger than the weak force interaction and than gravitation. The strong nuclear force is observable in the force that binds protons and neutrons together to form the nucleus of an atom. It is also in the force on a smaller scale that holds what are called quarks together to form protons, neutrons, and other hadron particles. A quark is a fundamental constituent of matter. Quarks combine to form composite particles called hadrons, the most stable of which are protons and neutrons. The point to be noticed here is the interaction and mutual dependence of fundamental components of matter, one on the other, one with the other. Modern man is especially conscious of his liberty, his power of independent living, his capacity to choose for himself, and he tends to avoid having to depend on others or be circumscribed by them. He is his own man. We do depend on others, but we do not especially like the fact. We take pride in doing our own thing, in being ourselves, and we are rewarded for being original in our projects. Plainly, there are strengths in this because we are endowed with freedom of choice and the power to do our own work in life. At the same time, any examination of the matter makes it clear that man is profoundly dependent on his fellows and on the world is dependent on him. A striking manifestation of this, for the one who has accepted divine revelation, is the effect of original sin. St. Paul writes that sin entered the world through one man, and with sin there came death, and death has spread to the whole human race. The entire cosmos is caught up in a process involving the most fundamental interdependence, one element sustaining, nourishing, affecting and depending on the other for good or bad. This pattern is seen in the action among galaxies, in the relation among nations, and in the action among quarks. For all his sense of being an individual, man is essentially dependent for his proper functioning. But man is not only dependent for his ongoing needs and action, he is constantly dependent for his very existence, which is to say, for the fact that he is not nothing at all. He not only breathes the air around him, consumes the food he needs, and is sustained constantly in his activity, as is every other functioning thing in the cosmos. He exists. He is not nothing. For this very fact of his being real and an objective substance, he is dependent, not just, say, on the air he breathes, for it too is not nothing. He is radically dependent on the one necessary source of all being, which is itself dependent on nothing, and which has to be. As a matter of fact, all of changing, contingent, limited, and material reality is constantly dependent, for its very being, on the will of the necessary one. What I am saying is that all of the reality of our direct experience, be it our very selves or the cosmos around us, is marked by a radical dependence and interdependence. We all flourish in dependence on others and will decline in dependence on others, and through it all there is our radical dependence on God, our Creator. He is the only being who is in no way dependent on anything nor on anyone. But now, all this, of course, is just, well, a little vague, as it is so broad in its scenario. Is there some point at which we can touch base, as it were, and connect with the centre of it all? The car stops at the service station and refuels at the tank. That is the particular point at which it connects with what it depends on. Is there a point at which we can connect with the most fundamental source of our ongoing being, our life and our flourishing, especially our flourishing in the moral and holy life? Well, such a question brings us to our gospel today that I read earlier from John chapter 15, verse 1 to 8. For in it we are told of the one on whom we depend for our all. That one is Jesus Christ. St. John writes in the prologue of his gospel that all things were made through the Word who was God. In him was life, and the life was the light of men. John chapter 1, verse 1 to 4. Our gospel today, that I read earlier, is taken from St. John's account of the Last Supper. And our Lord is explaining in simple terms our complete dependence on him if our lives are to bear fruit. Remain in me, and I will remain in you. No branch can bear fruit by itself. It must remain in the vine. Neither can you bear fruit unless you remain in me. I am the vine, you are the branches. John chapter 15, verse 1 to 8. There appeared in our world at a certain time and in a certain place, and there walked among men as their friend and teacher, the one on whom all depend. The way to man's salvation and his flourishing is to enter into union with this man who is the eternal God the Son. In a sense, all has been made simple. All we must do is believe in him genuinely and totally, and walk the days of our life as his obedient and loving disciples. Our dependence is thus highly focused. On him do we depend, as does the entire universe. But we must act on this fact by free choice, especially in respect to a holy and moral life. We and all the nations are called to be his disciples. Let it be so then.